I'm just trying to, this was a different kind of perspective through which we were trying to understand, this question of abundance or excess of water which existed in the city. So I mean, that was primarily the reason why actually we try to understand its hydrogeological character. So I mean, if you just look at these slides, I mean, these are slides which actually the Godar people shared with us. The way the Po Valley is located, the Po Valley contains the entire Turin plain, which lies between two main mountain chains. If you look at the top part of the thing, you see the Alpine chain there, and you see the Apennine chain at the bottom. Now, this whole area between these two mountain chains where Turin is located is a massive reservoir of groundwater. It's probably the largest water aquifer in Europe. Geologically, the Turin plain is located at the foothills of these mountains. If you see that center, that red line somewhere there, that's somewhere in that area. Now the various levels of water aquifers in Turin, it's characterized by a surface level aquifer which creates an initial groundwater table of about 0 to 40 meters. The water drawn from this level is generally not used to meet the drinking water needs of the city, but is employed for industrial, agricultural, and other such use. There's a high risk of contamination in this layer because it's close to the surface and therefore very vulnerable to pollution. But in Turin, for example, you can find water at levels as high as 20 meters, which is amazing, I think, for any place. That you found groundwater so not so deep. But this water cannot be used for human consumption. And there are a couple of shallow wells. Wells are again one of the main kind of the main sources of water in this region. The wells at this level are used only for agricultural and industrial purposes. Now, below this first surface aquifer is a layer of is an impermeable layer of bedrock which protects the main aquifer that lies beneath the bedrock. And this main aquifer that lies below this bedrock, more than 50 meters from ground level, is from where the potable water of the city is drawn from. So most of the wells of SMAT, which we were talking about some time back, SMAT is the main source from which the city gets its water, are located at this level. And the maximum percentage of drinking water in the city actually comes from this level. Also, because of Turin's location, I mean, it's at the foothills close to two mountain chains, the level of groundwater recharge is very, very high in this area. Not only through rain, but also through snow melt. So because of this snow melt, there's a lot of water which is actually going into this aquifer. But it's funny now. I mean, when we were speaking to the hydrogeologists at Godar, they told us that ever since the industries have shut down in this area, obviously the level of extraction of this groundwater has gone down. So ironically, the groundwater table in many areas have begun to rise, which is again a very something which really took us by surprise. Because you don't hear of rising groundwater levels in too many places. For example, lots of parking lots in Milan and Turin, which are located at basement level, have begun to flood now because the groundwater levels have begun to rise there. Now, if we look at water at the supply level, we've already spoken about SMAT. The 75.2% of the water that SMAT supplies to the city come through these wells that we were talking about. 16.3% come from the surface water from the river Po, which are treated and then are put into the supply, and 8.5% from other sources which are outside the immediate vicinity of Turin. The Piandella Musa place called Bam, which is known for its natural springs and very high quality of water, and another river called the Sangon. SMAT operations here, I mean, just to give you a kind of brief overview of how much SMAT is servicing this area. It's servicing about 2 million people in the region in and around Turin. And they deliver an average daily flow of water that is capable of meeting a maximum consumption capacity of 7,037 liters of water per second. So I mean, that's the amount of water that the city is actually ready for in terms of its things. Along with drinking water, SMAT also has water purification plants, which one of these plants we visited, the Po Sangone plant, to kind of try and understand the whole flow of water through the system. In the Po Sangone plant, about 2,500 liters of river water is being purified every 5 seconds and is being released back into the river. The yearly discharge of sewage from the entire Turin and areas around is about 230 million cubic meters from about 450 square kilometers that it's servicing. So I mean, if one looks at all these factors, we can kind of say that historically this area has been favored by agriculture and industry, both of which require huge amounts of water. The Po Basin is the largest aquifer in Europe, and through based on hydrogeological data and in terms of the water supply system that is coming into the city, And also the fact that there are 760 Torettos in the city that run down the clock potable water in the city. All these point towards a certain abundance of water in the city, and that's something which became very interesting to us. And what is this idea of excess of water? What does it mean when a place actually begins to have enough water? So at the same time, SMART has also recently begun to be making these kind of kiosks, for the distribution of its own water, and some of these kiosks also charge small amounts of money for sparkling water, especially. And ever since the emphasis of SMART has shifted from providing water from industrial usage, the focus has somehow become the consumer, and it's kind of apparent in structures like these, which are providing ready-made water through machines, etc. Now, for us, it became important that what does this apparent excess of water in Turin signify? In this area, compared to a lot of work that we have done before, we begin to see a very new dimension to the notion of water, where it seems to be a resource that is free-flowing and available in plenty. The water availability is in sync with the demand. Water extraction is in sync with the capacity of the aquifer, and there does not seem to be any palpable consumption pressure on the resource. So given all of this, we became curious to know about what happens when there's an abundance of water, or what happens when water exists in excess. And what happens when we begin to probe this idea of excess a little deeper? What is the notion of value that gets created around water when it exists in excess? And this notion of excess and value is also an ethical question for us. More often than not, the value of a resource seems to lie in its scarcity or its lack, or when its access and availability is limited or controlled. But however, given the larger global scenario where water is one of the fastest shrinking resources, what does it mean for a place to have enough? And these questions are important for us, as water is not something that we can see in very linear, segregated terms. That because water is available in one place, it's not necessarily, the extraction of it is not necessarily having any impact on any neighboring areas. And for instance, even if one looks at the other parts of Italy, or one looks at even outside Turin, looks at other areas of the Piedmont region itself, they don't have the same kind of, don't seem to be having the same kind of access to this, endless water as we imagine it. As recently as July 2002, there was a severe water crisis in the southern part of Italy. Sicily was apparently one of the worst affected areas. And as per newspaper reports, the Italian government declared a state of emergency in 4 regions of southern Italy because of this water crisis. Even within the Piedmont region, based on our conversation with Piero, the agricultural areas where there is a crisis of this resource. In our research, we also came across an interesting historical incident that points towards the contestation over water in Piedmont region itself. The area, the Pian Musa, where we were talking about, in the 1890s, the city of Turin purchased water from the Pian Musa springs, but this was around 1896. But because of several disputes in that area among the local inhabitants there, who were fighting this, taking over of their water rights, Turin could not get this water to the city until 1922. So there's that kind of history of conflict that was there in that area, and of course the First World War also kind of put a stop to this whole thing. So in 1922, when this water finally came into this area, simultaneously around the same time, the industries were also coming up in a big way here. Like the Lingotto factory began operations in 1923. So there's a bit of a coincidence there. So, moving to slightly larger questions now, in the times that we live in, water seems to create its own regimes of control and usage in different ways. Whether through its excess in a city and the lack of it in neighboring areas in the region, or a political and economic regime around it like that in India that makes it profitable for some at the cost of others. Now, the question which became important for us, is it possible to imagine a resource like water which is primary and fundamental to all of us outside all these systems and structures? Now, against the backdrop of what we had done in the past and our residency period, it was a personal impulse for us to probe and evoke a primal consciousness of water outside all these existing structures. So we approached this question from 4 directions. One, trying to understand the space of power from the point of view of water, the organic works in the park and how they sustain themselves, the water networks in the park, the kind of water used, the vision for water that existed in this place. The second thing was to look at rhabdomancy as a metaphor of seeking something which is of value. The third was, what are the free forms of water outside structures? For example, rain, which doesn't have any external value attached to it. And fourth was the expression of a collective consciousness of water, a particular political event in Italy, which was a referendum against the privatization of water in Italy in 2011. Because it kind of stood out for us as a way of, here was this moment where this huge consciousness around the whole primal importance of water in a certain way. So, our initial conversations that we had in PAV with people here in PAV, that the fact that even though there was availability of water here in terms of the systems, water systems to sustain the garden, etc., it was very difficult to sustain the cost of irrigating such a large area. One. Also the fact that all this water that was being used for irrigation was potable water, so that kind of became a bit of a concern for us. And when we spoke with, in our conversations here, the initial plan we found out with PAV was to recycle white channel, was to try and create a system to recycle white channel wastewater and use it for irrigation purposes. But the cost of creating a system at that point were too high and too complicated in terms of negotiating municipality bureaucracy. The initial choice of vegetation species were also made based on those which could retain the water moisture as well as ensure a certain stability of the soil. For example, 3 rainforests were created in areas with high concentration of rainwater or points where rainwater would collect naturally. However, over time, only one of these rainforests has sustained itself, primarily because it gets constant recharge of water from the sink in the patio, which is right outside here, leading up to one of these structures. Maybe if you walk outside, you'll be able to see it. Given how important water was in the park, the extent to which it had been thought about already here, our attempt was to try and think of making this fundamental element visible and make visitors to the park conscious of its presence. At the same time, we also wanted to throw out some ideas about how one could in future think of other sustainable and cost-effective ways of water utilization in the park. Now, the idea of using rainwater is not a new idea in itself, but when thinking about questions of excess or the